right. Now that we just heard about our NAS file systems that you could do in the cloud with our 3FSX Windows file server, OpenZFS, and NetApp ONTAP, I want to talk to a customer who's using one of these file systems, FSX for NetApp ONTAP, in deployment. So today we have with us Taylor. Taylor, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, my name's Taylor Savage. I work for Phillips 66 on a team that manages our corporate storage and backup environment. So I do everything from daily administration to new cloud implementations and storage projects. So my role specifically is in our NetApp environment.
Great, awesome. And I understand Phillips 66 has been undergoing a cloud migration journey. Right. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our cloud migration started in earnest about 5 or 6 years ago. We were going through a cloud a digital transformation at the time, and like a lot of other companies were sort of at that same time period. And, there were some properties of the global energy marketplace that were causing some problems. And so our IT leadership just decided we wanted to be a bit more nimble, a bit more flexible in the way that we approach our digital and our IT footprint. So we started the cloud transformation, and now we're here. So.
Yeah, awesome. And so how does the file storage fit in with that? I understand you have a lot of file storage on premises today?
Yep, that's right. So we are a leveraged NetApp customer. So basically all of our unstructured data, as well as some of our VMware data stores at our remote sites, are all in the NetApp ecosystem. So we have all sorts of workloads. We have everything from general home drives to network team file shares to some of our more mission critical apps like pipeline monitoring, analytics. We've got our SAP ERP system that all run on NetApp. So NetApp runs, kind of the entire gamut of our unstructured file set. So.
Yeah, awesome. Sounds like a pretty wide range of use cases.
That's right.
And so as you're doing your cloud migration journey, tell us a little bit more about, how you decided where that went in AWS and where that took you.
Yeah, so when the migration started, we were asked to do the migration in as least disruptive of a way as possible, right? So we wanted to do it fast and non-disruptively. And so what we had to do at the beginning was identify those opportunities where we could find cloud solutions that were exactly the same as what we were providing on-prem. And that was a little bit difficult because at the time there weren't any native NetApp file solutions that were running in AWS. So when FSX ONTAP became available, it was a complete game changer for us because we were able to use some of the features of FSX ONTAP that we were struggling with on-prem. So we no longer had to manage hardware, whether it was EC2 instances or on-prem hardware. We no longer had to manage licensing. We could take advantage of the intelligent tiering that was available in FSX ONTAP. So there's all these opportunities that FSX ONTAP provided for us. Specifically, our first level of migration was in our DR space. So today, what we had been doing was taking all of these remote disparate site NetApp infrastructures, snap mirroring those volumes to a corporate colo or corporate data center DR location. And what we're able to do just within 2 or 3 weeks, we were able to take 300 terabytes of DR data and literally just repoint those snap mirror jobs from a DR cluster to an FSX cluster running natively in AWS. And so within 2 to 4 weeks, we were able to take advantage of all those things I talked about, like the licensing and the lack of hardware management, the streamlined support, the intelligent tiering. We also didn't have to retrain our guys to learn a new technology. We could just continue to manage the NetApp CLI just like we were managing on-prem. We can now do that in cloud. So again, we're able to move 300 terabytes of data in a month, and we're at that point running cloud native for our entire DR environment, and it took very little work from a man hours perspective. So it was very nice. It's definitely a game changer for us in the DR space.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're able to do it in such a small amount of time without much disruption to your users.
That's right.
What was the benefits of your on-premises infrastructure? So now that you kind of vacated that and you moved to the cloud, how did that help?
Right. So in the DR space, the biggest advantage was we got to get rid of hardware. We didn't have to renew for a 5-year support life cycle. Right. So that was just a big benefit for us from a cost perspective, was immediately being able to get rid of that space. The other piece for us was, I kind of already mentioned, but taking advantage of the intelligent tiering. Now we could begin to tier off most of our storage to S3. We weren't doing that before. I think I looked right before I came, and we had about 50% of our data that had now been tiered off to S3, which before we were paying for hardware storage for that. So that was also a huge benefit for us.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's great. And I understand you have some production use cases as well. So you kind of started with DR.
That's right.
And tell us about the next project that you had.
Yeah, so kind of part of the overall plan really was to eventually move all of our production workloads to FSx ONTAP. For those applications that were candidates to be migrated to AWS, everything's going to run on FSx ONTAP. And we've been kind of working on that for a number of years, number of months. And we had an opportunity that came up earlier this year when we acquired a midstream company out of Denver, and they are also a NetApp customer. They had 132 terabyte NetApp stack, same type of data workloads that we had, and they had a special requirement where they were going to have a data center lease renewal come up at the end of the summer. And so our leadership asked, can we get this moved in 2 months before we have to renew that data center lease? They didn't want to have to do that. And so they asked us, you guys are already working on this storage migration. Can we ramp it up and get this specific data set done? And so luckily we were able to do that because of the features that FSx ONTAP provides. Essentially all we did was we took the production and DR workloads that was on this midstream company's infrastructure. We snap mirrored that data to the cloud. We took an outage weekend after about a week. It took us about a week to move 132 terabytes of data. We took an outage weekend. We repointed all of our DNS entries. And within a weekend, we were up and running completely natively in the cloud and were able to take advantage of a lot of those great feature sets that FSx ONTAP was providing for us.
Yeah, awesome. That's great to hear. I'm sensing a similar theme here.
Sure.
Making it easy to migrate. So that's really great to hear. And so now that you've been in the cloud, so you have 2 use cases. You have your DR use case. You've got a primary production use cases. What are some of the benefits that you're seeing? How are things going with the cloud? What's the experience been like?
Right. So the initial experience has been exactly the same as what we were looking at on-prem, which initially is exactly what we were looking for. We didn't want to have to refactor our apps and rewrite our apps. So when we were able to move that initial production workload as well as the DR workloads, we've seen no complaints. I was worried about if there would be performance problems or latency problems, and we really haven't seen that. So our experience for the most part has been the same. But the added benefit for us now that that data is specifically in FSx ONTAP is we're starting to look at like I mentioned, the intelligent tiering. So we've got 50% of our data, at least on one workload. We're going to push that out to the rest of our production environment and hopefully get some pretty big cost savings there. Another feature that we're really excited about is in the VMC environment, which I know they spoke about earlier. But that's really exciting for us in particular because the way that we do disaster recovery at our remote sites, at our refineries, typically our global refineries, is we have NetApp providing the primary storage for those sites on an NFS data store, VMware data store. And we typically will snap mirror that back to a DR site. And then there's a warm VMware cluster that sits at that site, at that DR site, that we can present those data stores to in the event of a disaster like a hurricane or something that's headed to the coast. And so with the introduction and the certification of FSx ONTAP for VMC, now we're able to replicate that entire DR process in our AWS environment without changing the way we do anything. So we're very familiar with how that DR environment works. All of the guys that we have trained are familiar with that environment. Now that we're able to do that in AWS, we don't have to figure out a new way to do DR for those refineries. So we're essentially now getting to a point where if a hurricane's headed for the Gulf, we can run a refinery's IT infrastructure in AWS natively, doing it the same way we've done it before. So we're very excited about VMC as well.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. You've got DR, you've got some production use cases, the VMC thing, it's great to hear about. That was something that VMware certified on us about a year ago, and we're seeing a lot of common use cases with customers being able to deploy it that way and use FSx for NetApp ONTAP as a data store.
Right.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you for the time and coming out here. We appreciate the business, and the best of luck to you.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you.